In this video, we will go through a simple introduction to what it means to understand a passage. So here is a small passage. Please pause the video and read it. Okay, now that you've read and understood it, let's see what you've understood. First of all, can you answer this question? What color was the ice cream? You may remember that. It actually says in the text that the ice cream was pink. So one element of understanding what happened involves remembering elements from the text. How about this question? Was the boy standing or lying down? You can probably answer this question very easily, although it is not mentioned in the text. It's only mentioned that the boy was holding an ice cream next to a kiosk. And by this phrasing, you have probably imagined that the boy is actually standing up rather than sitting, because if the boy was sitting on something, I would probably have mentioned it. How about this question? Did the boy lick the ice cream or the kiosk? Okay, this is a stupid question, but it's not in the text. The text says he licked it, and the nearest it is the kiosk. However, you know that the boy licked the ice cream cone and not the kiosk. And in this case, it's mostly a syntactic resolution of the reference because this was the object of the first sentence and will tend to carry over as this object of the second sentence. But still, while reading he licked it, you have to be able to resolve it to mean the ice cream that was mentioned previously. And you did that without thinking, of course. How about this question? Where was the boy? Was he in a city or out in the woods? You know the answer to this question. He probably wasn't in the woods because there was a kiosk and a sidewalk and a road, and these aren't things that are found in the woods. And where did all this happen? You probably know now that it was a commercial, an advertisement on television or something like that. Although up to this point, you probably had no idea. But then the text goes in the next commercial, and based on this, you make sense of everything that happened previously. So this is one more thing that the text doesn't explicitly state, but you know that all of that happened in a commercial. So let's put this all together in what it means to understand. The first thing that is necessary, obviously, is to derive the sentence meanings by reading the sentences and then use those meanings to do a number of things. The first and most important is representing the elements of the text and their structure. So what is contained in the text? There is a boy, there is an ice cream, there are some things, and how they're related. What is the structure of these things and how one may cause the other or how one stands in relation to the other. So all of these things that come from the text, plus whatever you must infer, whatever information you contribute as a reader, so that you represent the relations among these things. If the text doesn't explicitly mention a relation, then it means that you are contributing this as a reader while you're trying to put all the sentence meanings together to make sense of the text. And in the end, construct a model, what is called a situation model, which means that your mind represents the meaning of the text as a model that contains the elements that are included in the text, the relationships they stand to each other, and any information you must have contributed in order for this whole thing to make sense. And then once you have constructed a model in your mind of what the text said, then this is your own representation of the content of the meaning of the text. So you don't remember the text anymore. The text is gone. If you understood the text, you forgot the text, and you remember the model you constructed. If you didn't construct a successful model, or you constructed something that didn't hang together, didn't make sense, then you forget the text and the model. So understanding in this sense means to construct a representation of what the text says in your head by contributing information as necessary to the information that you derive from the actual sentences. And to do that, there is a very involved and complicated mental process that we haven't fully explained. Actually, we are probably very far from fully explaining, but we understand that it probably includes all of the following steps. So first of all, one must recognize the words and access their meanings. And importantly, you must access the correct meanings for words that have more than one. Then you combine the meanings of words, which is what lexical semantics means. So you combine the meanings of words with the syntactic structure of the sentence. That is, the order in which the words are and the role the words play in this sentence. And based on the combination of syntax and word meanings, then you derive a meaning for the sentence, for each sentence. And then the meanings of individual sentences must be linked to one another and integrated across the set of sentences. And to do that, you not only take into account what these meanings are, but you also take into account your knowledge of text structure. So for example, in this text, which was a narrative text, you assume that things are narrated in a temporal order. So what is said first happens first unless explicitly stated otherwise. That is knowledge of narrative structure that you use in order to place the elements of the text in their proper sequence and relations. All of this time, the ongoing model that you're building, so the representation of the sentence meanings linked and integrated, is also being integrated with your general background knowledge. So the background knowledge includes knowledge of what you may find in a city versus in the woods, and also knowledge of how people normally say things. So whether you can infer that something happened or didn't happen depending on what is said. To achieve coherence so that things fit together, you must make a lot of inferences, actively contributing information as you build this mental representation based on what you know and what you assume. If you make the right inferences, then the entire model will be coherent, will make sense. But it's possible that different people might make somewhat different inferences and therefore reach a somewhat different representation or a different model for the same text, even though both may have properly derived the meanings of all the sentences and interpreted them. It's possible that different personal experiences and differences in background knowledge will lead to different understanding, different justified understanding of the same text. Finally, one thing that you do all along is to monitor your comprehension. So at every step of this process, you are thinking whether it all makes sense or not. This is very important, especially when you have to make inferences or when something in the text requires you to change how you've represented the previous passages. It was probably important when you read about the next commercial, which made you realize that everything described up to that point was part of a commercial. So all of these things must run flawlessly in order to reach the successful construction of a mental situation model for a text you're reading, which it means to actually understand what you read.